Parshas Va'era. The last few weeks we had learned the topic of being Makabel Yisurim B'Ahava, and we learned that there's a number of reasons why Hashem, which only does good to us and only showers us with abundance, why would Hashem create a world that there's so much suffering and pain? And we learned in length that it's so important that a person should learn to be humble, the humility, and that causes a person to be close to Hashem. It gives a person a kirvas elikim. And now let's try to get to the second of the reasons of the good, what Hashem has in plan when Hashem brings Yisurim to a person. When a person is suffering, what's the idea? Now, the second of the in the number of things is the Gemara Masechtas Brachos. The Gemara states that the Hashem wants to give for a Yid a present, a matana, something new, an addition to what he has. So what Hashem does is Hashem gives the person Yisurim, and the idea is so he should be able to get more and more good. That's the idea. Matana is a present. And we have to understand how this works and why does a person have to suffer in order to be able to get such a good. If Hashem wants to give a person good, so why do they have to suffer before? So the Parshias that we're learning in Shmois and Va'era, the Golos Mitzrayim, really teaches us this whole idea. Because that's what happened to Klal Yisrael. Avram Avinu learned that there is Hashem in the world. And Avram Avinu was told by Hashem, I want to tell you something, a big secret, you're going to have children, and I'm going to take them and put them through Golos Mitzrayim. They're going to have to work very hard, and beyond, it's going to be very, very painful, it's going to be a lot of suffering, but then, afterwards they're going to go out of Mitzrayim, and they will be ready to be Makabel the Torah, they would be ready to be able to understand the Torah, and so much that comes along with that, because being in Mitzrayim and going through everything that they went through, refined them and gave them new opportunities, and now they were ready to be able to be Makabel all these matanas.
Can I just ask if it was a few doors in Mitzrayim? So the first door of Yerda Mitzrayim, some of them went through the Yisurim and the slavery without going up with Chosh
Gadol 210 years. So now some people didn't make it to be able to see. And that is very important before we continue the Shir to mention this, that not only in Mitzrayim, it's possible in this world as well, being that each of us is only part of a puzzle. There's generations and there's a plan, and if you look back, so many times we see that something started, and then by the next generation, that's when the good came out. It's not always that person, even though many times it is the same person that sees the matona is the good shefa that Hashem brings after the suffering. But it doesn't have to be. Like we see in Mitzrayim, that there was many generations until Klal Yisrael as a whole, because when we look at Golos Mitzrayim, we look at Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael was in one matzav, and then look what happened. Look what happened to them. So it's always like that. It is always like that. Now in Mitzrayim, if you look carefully in the Mefarshim, we see that there's two separate things that happened. Number one is the people, being that they were in Mitzrayim, and they learned how to be an Eved. They learned how to work hard. They learned how to follow orders. They learned how to be nichna, like we called it, hachno, with humility. They learned, so it formed them to be a type of a person. It's not much different than when someone gets trained to be working and to serve in the military, to serve. So it changes the type of person that you are. If it's a teenager that's just having fun and having no achrayas, no responsibilities, and then they learned how to get up in the morning and 14 hours straight, and and sleeping, how much they give to sleep, it turns them into a different type of a person. So that's number one that happened in Mitzrayim. That's more the topic that we learned the previous weeks. A person learned how to be a nichna to Hashem. That's number one. But besides that, the Sfarim teach us that in Mitzrayim there was like particles of their neshama. It's called like nitzoitzos. It was their neshama regained deeper parts of their neshama by being in Mitzrayim. They picked it up, and they went out of Mitzrayim with all that. Vayinatzlu es Mitzrayim. They cleaned up Mitzrayim. There was a lot of kedusha lying in Mitzrayim, and the Yidden, when they were there, picked it up. And the Arizal explains that is really the meaning of Berechush Godel when they left. It's not only that they took along money and they took along different items that they took from the Mitzrayim. We mainly are talking about the levels of Kedusha that they picked up being in Mitzrayim. So we see two things that happened when they suffered. Besides that they became a different type of a person, they also went with full suitcases. They went out of Mitzrayim. And that's what happens to every person that goes through a situation of golus. Anytime a person is suffering, there's a certain golus. And a person has to know that there's, in addition to the person being humble, they are picking up deeper parts of their neshama, which is just going to stay with them. Now they have it. Once they achieved, once they got it, and they reached that depth of their neshama, then something, it opened up. It opened up a new thing for them. And that's one of the Yesoides that the Gemara teaches us. Reb Shimon bar Yochai, the Gemara says in Masechtas Brachos Daf Hey, Tanya Omer Reb Shimon bar Yochai, Shalosh matonos toivos nasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu LiYisrael. 3 major good presents Hashem gave to Klal Yisrael: Torah, Eretz Yisrael, and Olam Haba. V'kulan, the Gemara says, v'kulan lenosnan ela yidei yisurim. It's not possible to really, it's more than achieving, acquire. I mean, you're trying to be koined. You acquire it and becomes that you really have it. You're not just like, let's say if we were talking about Eretz Yisrael, there could be a person that just comes to Torah and doesn't really acquire it. It doesn't become part of him. He doesn't have the gain that a person could have from Eretz Yisrael. The same is with Torah. A person could have the Sefer in front of him. It definitely doesn't have to mean that he became a different type of person and he has the simcha that a person could have from Torah. And the same is with Olam Haba. All of the above, this psukim, Reb Shimon bar Yochai brings the psukim that it says in the pasuk, there's a highway, you have to drive through, it's not so comfortable, it's not so simple, but then, when you reach the goal, then you got something major, something amazing. And Reb Shimon bar Yochai is teaching us that every time a person is really supposed to be gaining a new level, a new matana, so a person has to go through something to be able to reach it. Reb Shimon bar Yochai himself really teaches us that idea with himself. Not only because he teaches in the Brayso, because that's what happened to Reb Shimon bar Yochai. Reb Shimon bar Yochai had the Romans, they wanted to kill him, and he had to be stuck. Like we all learned in the Gemara Masechtas Shabbos, he was hiding out there in the cave for 12 years, and then another year, 13 years, and it wasn't simple at all. He wasn't able to come out. He had to hide for so many years. If we could just try to imagine what it means, 12, 13 years. It's not. And then, the whole time that he was there, he had no normal food to eat. He didn't have normal food to eat, didn't have clothing. It was just really suffering.
His skin broke apart.
And above all of that, the Gemara says that his skin started peeling, that it was bleeding. The whole body of his dried out from sitting in the earth for so many years. That it was physically, it was so painful. And the Gemara says that when he came out, and his father-in-law, Pinchas ben Yoyer, saw him, that his whole body is so full of ptsaim, of sores, and wounds all over the place, and he cried, and that tear, which is salty, touched the holy body of Reb Shimon bar Yochai, and it was even more painful. And he saw how it took he saw Reb Shimon Bar Yochai suffering, and he said, "Oy li shereisicha v'kach." That means it's so painful for me that I have to see you in such a state. It's terrible that I have to see you like this. And Reb Shimon looked and he said, "You're making a big mistake." He said, "If not that I would have had this situation, then I would have never reached to what I reached Madrigas in Torah. We know Reb Shimon Bar Yochai with the Zohar HaKodesh. He reached levels in Torah that we don't know in this world people that reached that." And he said it happened because of this. So it couldn't have happened if I wouldn't go through this pain and suffering. So it's or this or that. And you know what I gain? You know what it means that, you know, the levels that I reached in Torah? So we should be dancing for it, even though it's painful. It's true. But look what I got instead. Look what I got instead. I was by the Siyum Hashas from Rav David Weiss, an ALS patient that learned the whole Shas more than once in this situation, not being able to talk and not being able to communicate, not being able to eat. Only eyes. The mind is working perfect, and the eyes communicate. Learned with Chavrus and Chazir, and even certain tests. I mean, totally learned it and knew it and achieved it. And I was by that Siyum Hashas, and it was very, very biggest oirus people that were there to see that he learned Shas. And Rabbi Yisrael David Schlesinger, Shlita, he's like Shtichel the Roh of the family. And he spoke with Rosha, and he mentioned this Gemara from Reb Shimon. He mentioned this Gemara of Reb Shimon, and he was elaborating on this idea that if people would understand what levels a person could achieve in this world, it's not shaykh to be masik. Here we have a person that because of that situation reached much higher levels than a regular person, because of the hardships. So that gives us an idea to all types of Yisurim. All types of Yisurim. It's not something that's said only specific. People know Eretz Yisrael niknas bi Yisurim. That if you want to acquire Eretz Yisrael, sometimes it's hardships, and Eretz Yisrael niknas bi Yisurim. It's the same Gemara. It's true. It's a very, very true statement. But it's not only Eretz Yisrael. The idea is that any real achievement, a ruchni achievement, something that's eternal, something that stays, something that's real. So we didn't learn yet why, but we have to pass through a certain test, like Yisurim, suffering, and only then a person could achieve it. Only then a person could achieve it. And that's something we have to understand, that when a person is in the middle of suffering, and it's painful, and it's not easy at all, they have to really understand that right now they're on a journey. Besides everything that we learned in the previous year, another time, they're on a journey for something that they're getting to someone. It's someone that's on a plane, and they're throwing up, and there's turbulence. And if they're traveling with children and the kid is screeching and the neighbors are screeching, are even more upset, and they're like not handling it. They're just looking, and it's only another minute past, and they think that they're going out of their mind. It's true. It's funny to sit and laugh, but when you're in there, in that matzav, it's not really very exciting. But there's something there, a person knows that they're in the middle of traveling. They know that one of the reasons why a person could manage is because there's a big GPS telling you another 8 hours. In life, we don't have that GPS. And that's a very, very big part of the Nisoyin, and we learned, the last year we discussed that. The person doesn't know. It's part of the deal. The person does not know how long it's going to take, but what they do know is that they're on a journey to gain something new. You never come back and say, Baruch Hashem, the Torah finished, and now we're back to square one. Baruch Hashem like before. So why do you go through this? You never. That's it. Whatever was, and now you only come to a better place. That's one of the ideas. Now, when a person is in pain, it's sometimes hard to be excited that afterwards you're going to have a big madrega. A person like, no thanks. What are you telling me now? You're giving me presents. Thank you. Hold your presents. And the Gemara talks about it. It's a Gemara. When a person is in pain, it's painful. It's totally not about a shear. It's the real deal. It's painful, and it doesn't get chizuk sometimes. In a certain sense, like a person feels like, I never asked for this. And I don't know what you're planning to give me, but this is terrible. This is not normal. That's the feeling. It's a saying that people feel it throughout their life, not only with Hashem. Someone is telling them, I have to take you somewhere. You're going to enjoy this. After 2 hours, thank you. I'm fine. Let me go back to work. And what are you doing? So,
sometimes a person can feel in the middle that their ruchnis is going down.
Definitely.
Right.
They've lost their simcha, they've lost their immune challenge.
Definitely.
They don't feel it's getting them ahead.
They don't feel that they're getting ahead in ruchnius, and you're being told that you're going to gain in ruchnius. They lost their davening, they lost their yeshiva das, their Shabbos, so many things that they can't do. And in Mitzrayim, it wasn't much different. Because in Mitzrayim also, they weren't in a good matzif. It wasn't a good atmosphere, it wasn't a good environment. But here's an interesting thought that could help a drop. Just a little bit. If we look in the Parshias, this whole Sefer Shmois, we just entered this Sefer Shmois, it's called Sefer Golus or Geula. That's how it's called. The Sefer Bereshis was talking about the Ovos. The forefathers talk about Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Now we finished. So Chazak ben Ischazik, and it's a whole different Sefer. It talks about exile and coming out. It's a different Sefer. Now, what's interesting about it is that how many psukim, how many parshas talk about the years that they were in Golus in Mitzrayim and they worked hard. Minimal psukim. A little bit of Parsha Shmois. The second half is really discussing Moshe Rabbeinu, talking to them, and Hashem telling Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm going to take out the Eden from Mitzrayim. Again, in the end of the Parsha, it gets worse, and Parah says, I want them to work even harder, but it's a few psukim. And then Parshas Va'era is already the Makkos. It's already the last few months, which already the Mitzrim weren't able to be Meshabed. The last year they didn't work. They were in Mitzrayim. And boys, the whole Yitzias Mitzrayim, and B'Shalach is Kriyas Yamsov, and Yisrael is Kabbalas HaTorah, and Mishpatim is learning the Torah, and then how beautiful this Truma, they built a Mishkan, and the Tetzav is the big day Kahuna. And if you draw the picture, some people could get the feeling it's not fair. You're not saying a story. It's so many times.
210 years.
210 years, then, you know what it looks like? It looks like it must have been a full week that they were working hard. Yeah, because it looks like they're really screaming. It must have been a full week. And you're talking about, do you know what 200 years means? It's like generation. It's not fair. When two kids come, they got into a fight, and the father asked him, hey, what do you do? Yeah, I didn't do nothing. I was just walking by, and I told him something or whatever, and then he slapped me. You're not saying the full story. You're not saying the full story. You didn't just say something. What did you say? I want to hear what you said. That was a whole conversation. Why is that? Isn't the Torah telling us the truth? The Torah is telling us the accurate, the emes. The Torah is emes. And it's a very simple answer. Because when you're saying a story, you're telling, you have to be able to elaborate for the part of the main part of the story. If it's the name of the story, sometimes you give it the name of the story, and the chapters. The idea when a person reads a story, learns about a story, is to get the right perspective. Perspective is not always judged. You don't measure it by how many years each thing was. I think a very simple example would be a person that had his lottery ticket. He knew that at 10 p.m. they're gonna pull it out and he's gonna find out if he won. Now he's, for some reason, I don't know what got into him, but he's like thinking, I might be the winner. $20 million. And since the morning, he's standing and waiting, holding it in his hand. You can't talk to him. And it's going on for hours till 10 p.m. Now if he won, if it actually happened that he won the lottery, and then you're going to ask him how his day was afterwards, and he would say, well, I was waiting, and guess what? You're not going to believe it. I actually won $20 million. He's going to be all busy telling you about who told him to buy the ticket and why he thought he's going to be winning. Why isn't he saying the whole story? You were waiting for hours and hours and talk about it. And in the end, put it in small letters. He also won the lottery. Yeah, it's also true. It's because if you won the lottery, then that's the story. Then that's the story. And all the above, it just gets, you could say that you were waiting, but that's about it. Because if not, then you're not understanding what happened. Parshas Shmois Veda Boi B'Shal Chisim Mishpatim is really teaching us about that we won the lottery. It just happens to be much more than 20 million. Much more than $20 million. It's everything. It's everything. It's nitzchi. It's having a relationship with the creator of the world. It's having the ability in every situation to talk to Hashem, learning Torah, nitz olam haba. And that's what happened. And that is what happened. And that's why the story said that way. The suffering that was beforehand was suffering. If you look at the psukim don't try to shove it away. It says that it was very tough. It says that they were screaming. It says, but you can't compare what they went through to what they got. And that's teaching us the right perspective on Yisurim, even though it's painful. It's be'emes suffering. But the emes perspective is that if we look at Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, for an example, it's true, his body and everything, it was painful. But now, if we look back almost 2,000 years, it's from when Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was in this world till now, where Reb Shimon is now, and what happened to Reb Shimon for always, lenetzach nitzochem. And his tainuk that he had on this world, if you look in Zohar HaKodesh, how much pleasure Reb Shimon Bar Yochai had in being here in this world, then it gives us a different perspective. And we had learned, about 6-7 shiurim ago, that the das of a person overpowers the pain. If a person would be able to concentrate fully on something else, then they don't remember their pain, they don't feel their pain. Now there's levels and levels. Because a person should be able to do it when they have physical pain. It's a high level. It's not easy. If it's possible, yes. In this generation, yes. Because it's a fact. It's something that a person has to have a lot of exercise in the mind, but it is true. There is such a thing. We can't say that every person is close to being there, but definitely when it's emotional pain, anything. Now, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai had suffering, but then the pleasure overpowered it, and he also had this world. And that's with every kind of Yisurim. Yisurim brings something new, opens up something new. When Yidden were in Mitzrayim, it opened up something brand new. Yetzias Mitzrayim gave them something they never had. Besides the Hachnoah, it was like a full achievement. And we say in the Haggadah Shel Pesach, Shabbos, and Eretz Yisrael, and Beis HaBechira, a whole list of 15 presents everything that they got, because they left Mitzrayim. Now, the way to actually reach all those matanos that Hashem gives is, of course, when the person tries to be humble and accept the situation as much as possible again and again. And every day it's a new challenge. Every day it's a new challenge. Sometimes every hour or even every minute is a new challenge. And even if a person doesn't win every single minute and sometimes fails, but then they start again. They just start again. I know I shouldn't have thought that way, but they start again. It says Moedigach when a person failed and they continue. It's like a tshuva me'ahava. I know I failed. And I'm continuing to do the right thing because I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not giving up because I failed. That shows when a person is like real. He's for real. Now, then the person really opens up themselves to be able to get all these matanas that we spoke. So this is this this topic of matonas. Now, let's continue on. These matonas, being that these matonas are ruchnistic matonas, are spiritual matonas, that's why it needs to go through suffering. Because when the more a person is megushim, that's a hard one. Materialistic. Physical. A person is more guf. Then a person doesn't have the ability to really acquire, to really connect, to be more spiritual. And Yisurim, suffering, does a job like nothing else. Does a major, major job in a person. If a person just doesn't fight it. A person once went into the room there was a chassid Rabbi Elerot. He lived here in Yerushalayim, and he went through a lot of suffering. He didn't have children, and he had a sick wife, and he was sick, and he lived in a basement that was run down like not normal. He's still, I think it's still around. And someone walked in, and he was in pain. He was in bed, suffering, in the middle of the night. He couldn't sleep from pain, this side, that side, and someone wanted to help him. And he said, "Come, let me comfort you." And he said, "Please." He said, when the washing machine is in the middle of a cycle, you don't stop it in the middle. He said, "I'm in the middle of a cycle. I don't want it to stop." That's what he said. To be able to be in that level, that when a person's in physical pain, to be able to say that, it's not a cute humor just sitting around and saying it. That's what he was doing to me. He knew he was like, this is what's happening to me, being clean, cleansed from all kinds of things, and then a person reaches a madrega, this world, the next world, but it comes. If a person doesn't fight it, then he definitely got it. So that's the reason why the suffering. Eretz Yisrael is something which a person has to be spiritual to be able to really get what Eretz Yisrael has to offer. As we know, a lot of people live in Eretz Yisrael and doesn't do much to them because it's not an automatic thing. It's always there pending. It's always ready for a person. But if a person doesn't work on themselves, then Eretz Yisrael can have a hashpor. It can't really make the person a different person. And the same is with Torah. We know, as painful as it is, a lot of people that are learning Torah, it doesn't change them. Because if they don't have the humility, and they're just in the middle of eating a big sandwich, or like, it's sometimes not even geschmack to say, but they're sitting at the beach in their swim car, whatever it is, and they're holding up, doing the daf, it doesn't mean something's gonna happen to them. It's very nice to have a Gemara instead of a newspaper. That's true. That's 100% true. We always have to know. We never make fun of something just to say. It's the idea that we're trying to bring out. But in order that it should seep into the person and change the person, that needs that a person should be working hard. Now, the good news is, and it's very, very important, the good news is that it doesn't have to be that a person should be going through the most craziest suffering. Because if we understand why suffering is needed, that opens up a light bulb that, if a person takes upon themselves to do things that are very hard for them, and it's bemis, they know it's tough, but they break themselves to do it, they break their midas, they do something that's hard for them, then automatically they become more spiritual, and the less magushim, the less physical. So what happens is that it's going to work. Torah is going to work on them. That's what we know. People that they fight sleep to be able to cover what they're supposed to be learning. And it's not easy. But they get up, they find their nose on the Gemara, and then they get up again, and they stand up, and they finish. You can't imagine what that does. Because what's happening is that the person is transforming themselves. And everyone on that level. It doesn't have to be being up all night. They're all not. It's about working hard. Everybody understands, like we mentioned before, that youngsters that they serve in the military, they go out different kind of people. It changes them, and it could have a long-term effect to be more responsible people, and people that go to work and they don't just sit around and schmooze. They work and they work hard and they're serious about it. It's good for them. Could you imagine when it's done, Ruchni is that way, that a person takes Yiddishkeit very serious, very, very serious. And whatever they take, wherever they're up to, if it's davening, learning, Shabbos, Midas, anything that they decide, okay, next, we want to achieve the next level, and I want to do it, and this is where I'm up to, I want to do this, and then they just do it. Whatever it takes, they do it, even when it's hard. That's when you see people change. And it's not about because they're so consistent. Because they're so consistent. It's of course also, but it's much deeper than that. You have to understand that. It's not only because they're consistent, it's because those days that it was tough, and they did it anyways, that went in. That went in. And then all of a sudden you see the same person, he's talking differently. You knew him 2 years ago, and he was this whole, he was talking like the whole world is his. What happened? Something happened. Something shifted inside, and the Torah went into him, and he became more, he's refined, but it could only be Torah Niklas be Yisurim. And Yisurim could be that, like that also. And when Hashem decides that a person should have a certain situation going through, because we don't know all the reasons, we're entering that sugya, Tzadik V'Ra'alai, and the whole thing, where a person doesn't know all the reasons, but they should know, it's an opportunity. Because if I learn, or any other Avodas Hashem that I do while I'm going through this, that I'm not going to forget. People that they do Daf HaYomi, they finish the whole cycle, they could tell you on certain blätter from that cycle, I'll tell you, when I learned that plot? I'll tell you. I was in the hospital, it was 2 a.m., and I was standing, I was falling from my feet, and that's when I learned that plot. How do they remember? They don't remember every blot. No idea when they learned it. But those blätter they remember. Good. Exactly. And it's not only about remembering the number. It's just a simon, it's a sign. If you remember that 7.5 years later, oh wow, this plot I learned last cycle like that, you could also understand that the ruchnius of that went in. That plot went in. And it did something that stayed. It's something that you could feel, it's something that stayed. It's something that leaves a roshim. It's not only about learning, it's explaining us that Yisurim opens something up in the heart. And once the heart is open, we are capable of gaining a new matana, something brand new, which we don't know what that brand new level is going to be. Reb Shimshon Pinkus says his story, it's printed in the Tiferet Shimshon Agodah Shel Pesach. Hashem opened up his moyach, and he understood so many things in Torah, and he was zocher to be mashpiyat till today, the Sforah and everything. And he says the story. He says, I'll tell you, I remember when it happened. I remember what happened to me. It was Leil B'dikas Chometz. I was a bocha in the dormitory. And it was late at night, and you want to prepare to have a good night's sleep, because the next night is the Seder, and you want to have it all, you want to be there all the way. And he started thinking, he's in the dormitory, and there's the top floor, and nobody was B'dikas Chometz. And who's responsible? It's a mitzvah, Leil Yudah, you have to do it tonight, it's a chiyuv, you have to be B'dikas Chometz, if it's a place that people do chometz. And he was fighting with himself, if he should, if he shouldn't, and he said, you know what, you gotta do what you gotta do. And he went up to that top floor, and he saw that this is business. This is not about a 10-minute job. It's a mess, and it's a job. And he started, and he was fighting with himself. If I start working on this now for a few hours, there goes my Seder. A person is limited, And he said, you're not supposed to be making cheshbonis. If that's what I'm supposed to be doing, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And he was there, I don't know how many hours, if it was all night. But then he said that was it. When after that, he didn't know what's going to happen. That's always the nisayon. His mind opened up, and then from then, all of a sudden, it started pouring in ideas and chidushim and kiruvas elikim. And it's such an important story. It's such an important story because every person has a different situation that's their key. Reb Shimshon Pinkus never read that story about Reb Shimshon Pinkus. When he was there, he was just very simple bacha, and he had a big nisayon. And it just comes by surprise when it's tough. And when a person when a person uses that opportunity, and a lot of times it's not about a one-night opportunity, and then you have it. Totally not. It's sometimes this, and sometimes that, and sometimes it continues on half a year, or years and years. But that's from the same topic from Yisur. It's the same idea. That's why you need a matona. You're going to have to go through something, because if not, the person is not capable of having that matona. Doesn't have yet the kelim for it. And one more point about the topic of matonas. Very interesting nekuda. Matonas could be every type of matona. I mean, it's usually in wrapping paper. There's a reason why when you give a present to someone, it's in wrapping paper, because you don't know. You open it up, it's part of the thrill that you're looking. You hope that no one's pulling a joke on you and you find out there's nothing in there. But a matana is, you don't know. There's a lot of different ideas in matanas, and let's finish with one idea of a matana that not always a person chaps. There's a famous story, the Moira Naim from Chernobyl, Menachem Nochem from Chernobyl, the first Rebbe in the dynasty from Chernobyl, the Talmud from the Maggid from Mezrich, all square, Achmestrif, they all come from this Geza, this dynasty. So the Moira Naim, he was always busy doing this mitzvah of Pidyon Shavuim, to take people that are in jail and collect for them and help them get out of jail and help them while they're in. So he was always busy, and he one day was put into jail himself. People went to the government and they said this and that about him, and he ended up having this suffering sitting there. And there was this tzaddik, the Oir HaMeir of Zhytomyr, a tzaddik that was in that area, and he knew about this. So he went and he collected money, and he would go to the guard of that jail and he would give him shoichat. He would bribe him. So one day a week, he would sit instead of the Moira Naim. And it was every Thursday. Every Thursday, he took over, he bribed the guard, and he sat there, just in case they come check or whatever. And the Moira Naim left the jail on Thursday, and he went to the mikveh. He went to hear Kriyas HaTorah, because it was so important for him to hear Kriyas HaTorah on Thursday. That's why he picked Thursday. And he went to collect a Pidyon Shavuim. And then he came back, and that's how it went week after week. 1 week, he came back to the Or HaMeir comes there, this tzaddik, to the Moira Naim. The Moira Naim says, "You're done, I'm leaving the jail." He says, "How do you know?" He says, "Because I'll tell you an interesting story that happened. There was this woman that came to the window of the jail, and he understood that it was, in Chernobyl they say it was Soro Imeinu, not Ochel Imeinu. There's two gears to the story. And she told him, she asked him a question. Avram Avinu was such a big tzaddik. Why did Avram Avinu get tested that he had to go and wander? He had to leave his place. Lech lecha me'artzecha me'ladecha be'savicha. Why did it deserve that? It's suffering, it's tsar. So she said, the reason was because Avraham Avinu's main mitzvah was Hachnasas Orach. Now Hashem wanted, because you do this mitzvah, I want you to acquire higher levels in this mitzvah. Now, if you don't really experience the hardship of someone that's now traveling, that doesn't have where to eat and doesn't have where to be, then it's still missing in the levels of Hachnasas Orach. That's why Hashem told Avraham Avinu, I want you to be in that spot. I want you to be nowhere. And you don't have a house, that's it. Where you're going, you don't know. And you feel what it means not to have food and have to come on to others. And now when you'll be Mekayim Hachnasas Orach afterwards, it'll be on even a higher level. Now, this is what that woman told the Moira Naim. He understood that the reason why she told it to him was because that's the answer why he had to be in jail in the first place. Because his mitzvah was Pidyon Shavuim, His mitzvah was to help people that are in jail. So that's why he was tested with that, because Hashem wanted to give him a matona. Got it? Hashem wanted to give him something that you deserve that matona. If you wouldn't be doing Pidyon Shum, you wouldn't be sitting in jail. You got it? How deep that is. No, because you're doing that mitzvah. Because you're doing that mitzvah, now you're going to sit in jail. How's that fear? That it doesn't make
outside eyes, it looks like less din, less dying.
Yes,
that this person.
Yes. To the outside eyes, it looks like from all people, he's sitting in jail. But here we have the Moranim, and we have such a beautiful answer to that. The Moranim told that tzaddik, once I was told that, now I know I'm going to leave jail. It gets even deeper. Because he understood that as long as he was supposed to go through this nisayon, he wasn't allowed to know the reason why he's sitting in jail. Because if he would, then it would just be a free ride. He was like, I'm not really sitting in jail, I'm I want to just feel it. Let's go for 2 hours to jail to see what it is like. No, he wasn't told. No malach came to tell him, and no tzaddik came to tell him, and nothing. It was just dark. Dark, and this is what it is. He figured out that if I was told, if Hashem sent Sarah Imenu to tell me, it means I'm done. And the next day he left the jail. Now, people have this question all the time. This person did such chesed. He has to be challenged with that himself. Doesn't make any sense. Why would Hashem do it to him? In so many different areas. It's in chesed, it's in chinuch. People that they did all their life in chinuch, and when it comes to their own children, they have such a challenge. He's this big mechanech. And then, it's not only that, it's also the busha, because people are saying, when it comes to his own children, this is what he's worth. And it's so painful. But if we just think about it, if we think about it a little bit, the pain of all the parents that are challenged in this ta'ich of chinuch, in this area, so much busha. It's such deep pain. It's not to fathom the pain. It's such deep pain. And that's what they're going through. That is what they're going through. And if we hear such a story, it enlightens us that we should understand, as painful as it is, but there's a matana there. There's a matana there, because if a person goes through that, then they get connected to that mitzvah, that they didn't only be there on the board, saying the drasha at a dinner and giving advice. It's so easy to just pick up the phone and give that person advice. No, you shouldn't have said that. Never do that again. Thank you. When a person is in the matzav. No, they went through it. They're connected to that mitzvah. Full circle. They felt it. They were in there. And they helped others. And now they help others with a whole different dimension. So deep. And it's not only in this area. There's so many different, I know personally, of such cases in refuah. It's so painful. People that have this organization, and they help people and struggling, and they really, really help families. And that's their whole life. Their whole life they gave away to help families that are struggling with machla, families that are struggling. And then, after years and years of doing this mitzvah, they get tested with such a painful nisayon. And it's so hard. And then there's these questions that come up. And people make sure to throw it in. You? Oh, it can't be. It can't be. Nah. And you'll see that everything will be good. And then it's not so simple. And then after all that, afterwards the devastating news, the doctor said this, the doctor said that, and it's just getting worse. How could it be? How could Hashem is doing that? If we would understand when Hashem sees a person did a good thing, and he sees a person is investing 40 years in something, a person, he's real. He did this mitzvah, he's connected to this mitzvah. But then, it could be that this mitzvah has problems with it. A person had some cover, a person had some shaloi l'shmo from the mitzvah, a person, he made a nice parnasa on the side. He wasn't really getting paid, but he was just taking for the tircha and for the bonus and for this and for that. And Hashem says, no. We can't let it get ruined. He invested his life in this mitzvah, he did such good, no, we're keeping it clean. and this is like Yisurim, and it's such a matana. It's in that area. Hashem is preparing a matana for the person, because the person is really, really finishing off that mitzvah. Now, if a person would understand that, it would ease the pain, because he wouldn't have the challenge of why. It's painful enough. The questions and the person starts to figure out, like, maybe it wasn't worth it, and that kills the person. If we know that it's a present and we know the right perspective, it helps the person be able to ease the pain, but more important than anything else, it reminds the person to take it with achnoah. That's the main thing, because then you really connect it to the matana. Because if not, it's not so simple. So that's the second topic when you took Yisurim Ba'ahava. Why? The good things from Yisurim, we learned achnoah, and this is the topic of matanas. Okay.